Is it okay to change or adapt your Qigong practice? That is going to be the topic of this episode of Qi Life. All right, so this topic was another one that someone sent in, wanted me to talk about, and I think it's a worthwhile topic to talk about. I'm guessing, I think the people who do watch this channel, there's probably a range of different levels of experience with Qigong. I'm guessing quite a few people who watch the channel are quite new in their Qigong journey, and they're just figuring out how they should think about different aspects of their practice and what's okay and not okay, and navigating their way through that. There's probably a fair few people who are a bit beyond that stage, and they're sort of more intermediate. They've got a bit of experience, and they know how to do a lot of things for themselves, but there's maybe different details of things they haven't thought about too much yet, and so they find it interesting to gain a bit more understanding and perspective on things. And there's probably even some practitioners who have been practicing for quite a while, have a lot of experience and understanding, but maybe just tune in because they're curious to see what I have to say about things. Particularly when you're in those new and maybe intermediate stages, there are all sorts of aspects where it's like, well, what's okay, what's not okay, what is safe or not safe, what's healthy, not healthy. And I think this question very much fits within that sort of context of to what degree is it okay to change or adapt a Qigong practice. And there are different points of view on this. There are some people who are like really traditionalists, and they're like, no, everything has to be done precisely the way that someone did it some time ago. And then there are other people who are like, yeah, you can just change everything and do it however you like. I have talked about that. I don't know if I made a vlog about it actually, but there is an article about that I wrote a while ago about the traditional view versus sort of the free spirit view. So we'll put a link to that article below if you're interested in that. And so, the traditionalists would be like, no way, you should never, ever change anything. And some of the free spirits would like, change? Like, what was there to change in the first place? I'm just doing whatever I like anyway. I don't think either. I mean, I think there's actually some merit in each of those views. Like, there's some value in like sticking strongly with tradition and doing things the way they've been done in the past. Because it does carry through little aspects, little details that otherwise might be lost. So there's value in that. And there's value in the more free-spirited approach of exploring and discovering for yourself. I think going too far to either of these extremes becomes limiting, though. And you think, free spirit, that's the definition of not being limited. Well, yeah, it does become limiting, actually, because having the structure of tradition, of theory, of principles, and so on, actually empowers you to discover more and to apply things more effectively. Even if you're giving yourself the freedom to change things and adapt, it's like to completely ignore the traditions, the principles, the theory, means that you'll have a tendency to sort of wander aimlessly. You don't even know what there is to discover or how to effectively pursue that. And so I think there's value of finding a balance between these. And yes, learning tradition, observing tradition, but still giving you the flexibility to explore and discover for yourself. So that's at a sort of a fundamental level. And then I guess we come to, well, why would you want to change or adapt a Qigong practice? And is it suitable for you specifically to change or adapt your Qigong practice? There's a variety of reasons why you might want to change or adapt a practice. Some common ones being you've got a physical injury of some sort, and so doing the practice that doesn't feel good or maybe potentially could aggravate an injury. That's a really good reason to adapt or change a practice. Another reason might be that you have a somewhat different purpose for your practice than the way you've learnt it. So the overall purpose of the practice was for one thing. You actually want to achieve something else. You're like, well, if I change it, maybe that's going to help me achieve what I want better. That's a pretty good reason to as well. And then there might be other things that are just related to personal preference or just how you want things to feel and so on. And that can also be a pretty good reason too. And I think to some extent, we all actually change and adapt our Qigong practices, even if we don't realize it, even if we've got a really traditional mindset and we're like trying to do things exactly the way that maybe they've been passed down. Naturally, because our bodies are different, because we see the world in a different way, we think about things differently, even if we're trying to adhere strictly to tradition, there'll be a tendency for us to make changes without realizing it, and that's a natural process. I recall it's quite a few years ago, and I do explain this to people since then though, but I recall quite clearly working with a particular student. So a lot of what I do with Long White Cloud Qigong is we run instructor certification courses, so really in-depth Qigong courses where we go deep into practices and all the underlying principles and so on. And then as part of the process, we do assessments. We check how well the course participants are doing the practices, if they've picked up all the important details, if they understand the principles and so on, because we want to really empower them to be confident in their knowledge and confident in their ability to practice for themselves, and also to share that with others. And we were at the final assessment stage with this one student, and she was demonstrating different practices, and she was really self-conscious about the fact that she didn't do the practices exactly the same as I did them, and that she didn't look quite the same doing them. And so I observed her doing the practices and went through, and she had pretty much all of the important parts of the practices right. There were maybe one or two little details where it's like, actually, you're missing this little part, we need to change this. If we change this, you're going to have a stronger effect, or, maybe a couple of details. But basically, pretty much everything she had right. She was doing the practices very well, but she had a different body shape than me. She also has a different personality from me. And so between both of these things, because of her body shape, yeah, she looked a bit different doing some of the practices. Because of her personality, there was a different quality to the practices that made it look quite different from me doing it. But the underlying principles were correct. And because of that, she was doing it really well. It was just slightly in her own way, which is really healthy. It's really healthy to let your own energy, your own personality carried with your energy come through into your practice and make it your own. That's completely natural. In fact, to some degree, we can't avoid it. So we might as well embrace it. So completely healthy and normal to adapt and change your practice in small ways like that, just letting your own energy come through. Coming back to more specific changes to practices, maybe you want to do a movement a completely different way, or something like that. Again, there are situations where this is going to be useful, for example, injuries or other limitations, things like that. Whether it's okay for you to do that depends on your level of understanding of the practice. If you understand the principles of the practice really, really well, then generally, it's going to be okay to change and adapt the practice, because you'll be able to do it in a way that still applies, expresses the principles in a suitable way, where you're still getting the value from the practice and you're not causing yourself any problems by doing that. I think a good analogy for this, it's one I use quite a lot, is food and cooking. When we're first learning to cook or bake, perhaps, and we're wanting to make something, it's normally really useful to follow a recipe to begin with. Because if we don't have enough understanding of how all the ingredients combine, and we don't follow a recipe, there's a reasonable chance that whatever we cook may not be very good. I mean, on the lower end of things, it may just not taste very good, or the texture may not be very good. On the worst end of things, we could give someone food poisoning. If we really don't know what we're doing, we do, something, that just doesn't work. However, as we gain experience with cooking and we cook multiple different recipes multiple times, and we get an understanding of how all the ingredients work together in the process of cooking, the combining in different ways, the heating and so on, how that all works, We then start to have some flexibility, and we can quite easily start to change the recipe. And we can start to go, you know what, instead of using this ingredient, I'm going to use this other ingredient. It's going to substitute well. Or I'm going to use a little bit less of this ingredient and a little bit more of this one. Or I'm going to cook it at a lower heat for a longer period of time because I want the texture to be different, and so on. And we pick this up bit by bit just from our own experience of doing the practices. Or possibly we might learn that if we study formally, at a cooking school, we learn very much like if we do this, it'll do this, and we can put it together. This applies very much to Qigong practice. If you have a good enough understanding of the principles, then by all means you can make your own changes and adaptations to whether that be around your own physical limitations, or again, possibly where you have a slightly different purpose. You're like, actually, I would like to get the practice to do a bit more of this. You can make the changes that will allow that to happen. Now, for most people, that takes some time to gain that experience. And so until you're to that level of experience and understanding, if there's something within a particular practice where you're like, this really doesn't suit me, I'm not sure what I should do about it, well, then of course you can consult with someone who does have that level of understanding and experience. And they can help you to make any of the changes that you want to make. So again, work with your physical limitations or adjust the effect of the practice towards what you really need. So yeah, short version is, yes, it's quite normal and healthy to change and adapt your practice when you need to. And yeah, if you don't have the knowledge or skill yourself, well, once you do have that, you can do it yourself. And if you don't, well, you can consult with someone with enough experience and they'll be able to help you with that. Because in the end, the purpose of our practice is about giving us the benefit that we need. And we're not one size fits all. We all have different things going on within us. And it's important that we're able to tailor our practice to our own needs, our own purposes. All right, I look forward to seeing you on another one soon.